So true. So true. Well, there's so much I could talk to you about. You are a wealth of lacrosse knowledge. But since this is a lacrosse goalie podcast, I thought we'd start with your lacrosse goalie career. And the first question goes all the way back to the beginning. Do you remember your very first time in goal? That story?
Well, yeah, I have two older brothers. They're 6 and 8 years older than I am. And so when I was 4 and 5, I'd see them playing with their friends in the backyard or the driveway, whether it be street hockey or throwing the lacrosse ball around or the football in the backyard. And uh, in order to play, I remember they were like, okay, get in goal. And so I replaced the trash can in the driveway playing street hockey. I replaced an empty net in the backyard, and they put a helmet. They actually taped up a Long Island Newsday newspaper and hung it around my neck as a chest protector, and gave me a stick when I was 5 and 6 years old. And that was my indoctrination. And again, if I wanted to play, I had to play goalie. So after doing that for, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years, I started to play lacrosse. I think I was in the 3rd grade in our town when rec became available.
I love it. I have this theory that there's only 3 reasons why people become lacrosse goalies, and yours is one of them, which is they have an older sibling who needs somebody to shoot on.
That's exactly right. Now the cool thing was when I was in 3rd through 8th grade, I was able to run a shift of midfield and play goalie. So I play half the game as a goalie, and then I'd play half the game as a midfielder. And that was really satisfying and really beneficial, quite honestly, a long term.
That's what I recommend all youth goalies do when they start out is spend some time in the field, because you learn some stick skills. Your lacrosse IQ gets a lot larger. You learn how to play defense. And even if you end up being a full-time goalie, like those skills end up benefiting you big time. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, 100%. I mean, just the shooting aspect of it. If you're a young midfielder or an attackman, learning how to shoot, the way you see the goal, and then you transpose that to when you're a goalie. Okay, what's that shooter looking at? What are his windows? What are his options? How is the defense playing him? What type of shot is he likely to take here? So those, and then the clearing game, understanding the field concepts, understanding when defenders are vulnerable or when they're in a good position. Having lived that yourself as a midfielder, knowing I can cover this guy, I got him, or I'm overmatched. I'm going to let him. I'm going to try to let him beat me down to a weak angle. So there's a lot of intricacies and just general sports knowledge that makes you better as a goalie.
Yeah. What drew you to the position, or I guess when did you first sort of fall in love with the position of lacrosse goalie?
I think it was right away. I'm kind of I would say intense. I'm a worker. I don't mind repetitive work. And so going out into my backyard and pounding the ball against the wall, against the back of my garage for 3 hours at a time was not uncommon for me. I mean, I spent more time on that wall. My neighbors used to, complain that I was making noise late at night or early in the morning when the ball was pounding off the back of our garage. And I go back sometimes and I'd like add up the math. If I was doing 4.5 hours of wall ball a week through grades, let's say 2 through 12, I figured it out with the cost of my scholarship. I was basically getting paid $50 an hour to play wall ball in my backyard. It was a great investment of my time.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You grew up.
But the challenges, yeah. So I didn't mind. I liked the training. I didn't mind getting hit by the ball ever, and I liked to factor in a game. To know that a game can ride on your performance and the satisfaction of winning.
Yeah. How did you develop that mentality of not minding to get hit by the ball? Because as a lacrosse goalie, even if you're one of the best goalies, I got to tell you, getting hit in the shin sucks. And a lot of goalies who start out, that's one of their biggest fears. They're just so scared of that ball. So how did you develop that? Or where did that come from?
Well, on game day, nothing really hurts.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I learned. Warm weather, I have no problem with getting hit. April, May, June, and summer. The ball just doesn't sting as much. But what I hated, and what I still just grimace when I see kids get a shot in the toe, a shot in the shin, a shot in the thigh, a shot in the bicep in February or on a cold day. There is nothing more painful. And I remember a series of practices I had when I was in high school, and I was a 9th grader, and we had a couple really good seniors, and I got pegged in the arm and had a huge bruise. I come out there the next day and I get hit in the exact same spot. And I mean, my arm was black and blue all over, kind of lost the muscle function. And so you learn to pad yourself up. You learn to take care of your injuries. I mean, there wasn't a night in high school. When I did my homework, I had an ice bag. I always went to the refrigerator. I got my ice bag and I put it on whatever needed, because, you know, as a goalie, if you get hit twice in the same spot, you can be dealing with some issues. So whether it's a thigh, a shin, or a shoulder, you know, it's best to tend to those the first day, ice them up, and then you're fine going forward. So that was never, you know, I wore shin guards in practice until maybe 9th or 10th grade as well, because, you know, you go back then, the shooters weren't that good. When you're young, the shooters aren't good. You're going to get hit more. So what I found is, as you advance through the levels, whether it's middle school, high school, college, pro, the shooters get better. You're getting hit less, actually. Yeah, they're shooting the ball a lot harder, but the chance of you getting pegged in the shins when you're playing at Johns Hopkins is a lot less than it is when I'm playing for the Lindbergh Titans on Long Island.
Yeah. You grew up on Long Island, you know, a lacrosse hotbed. Who did you learn the position of goalie from as you were a young kid? Was there like a specific camps you'd go to, specific person that coached you? How'd you go about learning this position?
I didn't really have a formal coach until, well, I never really had a formal coach until college. And so, you know, but I was always surrounded by enough people who knew the position, enough people who could warm me up correctly. I had good instruction at our rec program, where to stand, what type of arc to play. And so my fundamentals were always very solid. I was lucky enough when I was in high school that a Virginia graduate named Matt Reynes, who played at our high school, graduated from Virginia, and he was coming back and he was going to law school at St. John's. And he had played in Virginia's national championship game when they lost in overtime. I think it was 1980 or 81. And he was 3 or 4 years out of college, but he was shooting on me every day in practice when I was in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. And so I was getting college level shots in warm up for high school practice. And then I'd enter a game and be like, that's nothing compared to the guy that just warmed me up, who was a starting attackman for Virginia of a national title team. So that was a big advantage I had as a high school athlete.
Yeah. And besides taking shots, what did your training regimen look like?
Well, I taking shots, I think is gigantic. And it's something in season that I was always getting shot on extra before or after practice. I mean, that's something I really believe in. I was a 3-sport and then a 4-sport athlete. So my training off season was, I didn't pick up the stick very much. You know, I wrestled from the time I was in, you know, 4th grade until high school. I played soccer and then football. And so I was always in good shape. I was always training for something. And so footwork, flexibility, and strength were things that I was working on constantly. And then obviously when lacrosse season came around, it was just a matter of getting the stick skills and the hours, as I said, the hours invested against the wall in my backyard really kind of, that was the difference at that time.
Yeah. I was also a wrestler. I was a high school wrestler. Not as good as you. You're a two-time section champ, right? I don't know if you did. Do you do anything at the state tournament?
Yeah, I did. I lost a heartbreaking match when I was a senior. It became a real motivational point for me the rest of my athletic career. Quite honestly, I was holding on to a 3-2 lead in a match that I should have won, and I got reversed with about 8 seconds to go and lost. That wrestler made it to the finals, and he lost. He came in second, but it was a match that I clearly mishandled, and because I was holding on to the win instead of push the action. I should have cut him free for the tie and taken him down and gone up by 2. You know, and so that mindset I always took onto the lacrosse field. I may lose this game, but it's not going to be because I'm not going to be aggressive. And if you ever watch any tapes, you know, you watch my style was always aggressive. I'm going to take chances. At the end of this game, I'm going to walk off the field saying, you know what, we won or we lost, but I wasn't denied the opportunity to have fun, to take chances, and to be super aggressive.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I think there's a big correlation between wrestling and lacrosse goalie. And I've had guys on this podcast, Cipriano, I think Blaze wrestled. Like a lot of guys, you know, have that background in wrestling, because I think it's a lot of it's the mental piece. Like wrestling is a very difficult and mentally taxing sport.
You know, I mean, you know, I try to try to tell people how difficult it is in lacrosse to go from you're playing throughout your career in front of not very many fans. And then all of a sudden in college, there's some fans there, and you go to the semifinals and there's 30,000, 40,000, the whole world is watching, and nothing in lacrosse can prepare you for that. But to step on the mat in front of your friends, your teammates, your family on a Friday night against a wrestling rival from the town next door, and to lose that match in front of all those people is can be devastating. Or to win that match, to have the guts to step out there by yourself and to know what it feels like to wrestle in that moment, and then to wrestle in the postseason tournaments, knowing that if you lose, you're done, your season's over. To deal with that pressure, to deal with the stress, to deal with the uncertainty and the challenges of knowing that as you progress, the competition gets better and better. Those mental challenges were so important in my lacrosse career. There wasn't a second that I used lacrosse to prepare for future lacrosse. It was always I was using my wrestling background that to apply it to lacrosse. I mean, I was never you're never more nervous than you are for a big wrestling match. Even in the biggest lacrosse game, it doesn't even come close.
Yeah. And it's that one-on-one aspect. Like you cannot blame anybody else, you know, like on the lacrosse field or on the lacrosse team. If I woke up every morning and did an extra 6-mile run, like maybe, you know, that could translate into a win and me playing better. But in wrestling, like there's nobody to blame, you know, but you. And if you don't do that run, guess what? Your opponent is, and you're going to get beat. So I think that one-on-one aspect is pretty
That's right.
crucial.
You own it. I mean, when you're in wrestling, you own it. I mean, I remember walking back to school the next day and you're in homeroom after you lost a big match, and you own it. You can't, there's no excuses. You can't pin it on the defense. You can't pin it on the midfielders. You can't pin it on the coach. You own it. So that was definitely applicable as a goalie. Own the goals you give up. You should have had it. Every goal is a savable shot. Now, obviously there's scenarios where somebody else created that shot, but you know, you got to own it. And I really disturbs me when I see goalies like point or make motions to other players on the team. You know, do that in private, do that where no one else can see it. But, you know, own the fact that you just got beat for a goal.
Yep, absolutely. You touched on your style of play a little bit. I'd like to talk about that a little bit more. One, like when you watch goalies of your era, including Jim Beardmore, who I just interviewed, and yourself, like so active. I mean, so active. You know, there's a loose ball right in front of the crease. There's number 11 running and out, like just, you know, dodging through people. When did goalies stop playing like that?
I don't know. You know, Jimmy Beardmore was and is still, for his age, an incredible athlete. I used to watch him when Hopkins played Maryland when I was a freshman. I remember watching him warm up, and I was just amazed at what he could do. Behind the back passes, crazy clears. He scored goals at Maryland. He could have played any position on the field. He could have played midfield, and then long after college, he played defensive midfield at a high level of clubs. So he was a special athlete. You know, my skill set lent me to more short area quickness, where I was going to be that extra defender, the seventh defender, and any loose ball, boom, 5 to 10 yard sprints. I was like the fastest guy on our team. I'd get reeled in by 20, and then half the team would pass me by 40 yards. But lacrosse is played in smaller windows than 40 yards. Lacrosse is played in 5-yard windows. If you want to get a ground ball, you only got to be fast for 5 yards. If you want to get a ground ball and then get out of trouble, you only got to be fast for 10 yards, and the play's over. And so that was really the strength of my game around the crease. The burst of speed, ball. Dave Petromalo would do the takeaway check. The ball would be on the ground. He kind of had that guy marked. Everyone else would have their guy marked. Well, who's the free safety? Who's the free tackler? I'm the free safety. I'm the free tackler. No one's responsible for me. And so that's an opportunity to come out, make a play, get the ball to safety. And I would encourage goalies to be more aggressive on those plays. It's kind of a low risk play, especially if the ball is goal line extended or behind. You know, and you trust, and then your defense will start to play off of you. They know that when the ball hits the ground, if they can shield their man, they expect me to be there and to clean it up. So I wish goalies were more aggressive. I don't know. For a while, I thought the overall athletic ability of some goalies decreased. I thought because the way youth lacrosse is handled, maybe at a younger age, put the slow kid in goal, put the non-athlete in goal. But I see that changing now. I see this next crop of goalies is really athletic, and I think that bodes well going forward with the shot clock, especially. You can't hide if you can't clear you can't handle your position, then I don't think there's a place for you. So I think it's coming back to where it used to be.
Good. Good. I'm a huge fan of athletic and goalies that make plays outside the crease because, I mean, if you can earn that possession, it's way easier than a save. Way easier than a save.
Yeah, no, exactly. Pickoffs and ground balls, that's a possession, and a save is a possession. At the end of the day, you want to add those up. That's your overall grade. I think too many people put a stock in the save percentage number in itself, and there's far more to being a great goalie than just your save percentage.
Yeah. Making saves wise, your style, like none of the guys back in your era played in that deep arc, flat arc, but in the goal, right? Everyone was out sort of cutting off that angle. When I watch, there's only one YouTube clip I found of your highlights, but it seems like your hands are like a lot closer together than a lot of goalies these days play. And I'm curious if that's a thing or.
Well, yeah, I could show you a picture from high school. I was a little wider. They changed my stance a little when I got to college on my first day of practice, and I remember going back to my dorm room like, this is not going to work. I'm out of here. Who are they telling me that I've been holding this stick incorrectly my whole life? But I figured that out. A couple things. Stick technology. The sticks were heavier. Okay, the sticks were much heavier, and so the way you held your stick, we played with a much longer shaft back then. Fields were grass, if that. They were mostly dirt. And so if you played back, the bounce shot was in play, tricky bounce shots. And so you really had to use your body and move to get behind those bouncers to make stops. And so angle play, being out was beneficial. Guys could not shoot 100 plus miles an hour as well. So the speed shot wasn't as much a fear. It became a fear, I think, in the early 90s to mid 90s when the stick technology changed. Yep. But I just caught the end of that when I was playing club. But when I was in college, they used to screen goalies. They used to take wicked bounce shots on horrible fields, and the ball would kick just completely inconsistent hops. And so we were encouraged when the ball was out top to play on a higher arc. And to try to take those shots away with our bodies. So there's a lot of factors. The position has changed for the better, but there's a lot of factors that you have to evaluate when you go back and look at old clips.
Yeah. The long goalie sticks is something that you don't see anymore in today's game. Like I played with just a player shaft, like an attack shaft, because I loved how light it was. But when you look back at some of those older goalies, like there are some long shafts there on a STX Goldmaster. Is that what you're using?
Yeah. No, I played with for the era it was a medium length. I liked to be able to reach and pick off passes around the crease, and I felt that it helped my outlet passes. The longer shaft, I could throw to midfield and beyond with good accuracy. The other thing is the pocket technology. I mean, if you look at those tapes, I'm playing with a pizza flipper. I mean, there's very little pocket in that stick, and it amazes me. If I had those, I gave up a big rebound in that Syracuse game that really cost us. There's 2 goals I'd like back from that championship game, but one of them was a rebound. And like if I had the pocket technology today, let me tell you, that was not a rebound. But we're playing with. I used to get the kits, and the hard mesh was too hard, and the soft mesh was too soft. So I used to take the soft mesh and spray it with spray paint, white spray paint, just to tighten it up a little. And so or I'd get the hard mesh and get sandpaper and sand it down and soften it up. But it was very difficult to get a good pocket that was consistent, playing in mud in the rain and the weather back then, not on AstroTurf fields all the time. The equipment advancements have really benefited young goaltenders. They have no idea how lucky they have it.
Yeah. Well, do you think it's easier for the goaltenders nowadays? I mean, some could argue that, with the advance of the stick technology and in terms of offset heads, the pockets, these super lightweight shafts that shooters are shooting with, it's way harder as a goalie.
Way harder to make stops now. Absolutely no question about it. Shooters have 10 to 15 to 20 miles an hour. They have much better accuracy because of these sticks. Ball retention is through the roof. So you see these dodges where guys get to the middle of the field and get high quality shots that never existed in my era. We had defenders. If you came in the middle of the field, my defense was going to take your head off legally. That doesn't exist anymore either. So the challenges of the goaltending position have skyrocketed absolutely through the roof.
Yeah. Love it. Kind of going back to your story. So, you're in high school, like, good athlete, both in wrestling and lacrosse. I guess, when did you start to realize, hey, like, I want to play lacrosse at the next level? Like, this is something I could possibly do. And what made you choose lacrosse versus pursuing wrestling?
I think it was 10th or 11th grade, probably 11th grade. I started in varsity as a sophomore. I got a lot of time when I was a freshman because the other goalie got hurt. But I started to play really well as a sophomore goalie. And then as a junior goalie, I had a lot of success. Wrestling, I was really good in like 6th, 7th, 8th grade, kind of plateaued in 9th and 10th grade, as a lot of wrestlers do when they enter high school, just maturity level. And then, when I kind of grew up and kicked in with weight training, I had really successful 11th and 12th grade wrestling seasons. Had some offers, Ivy wrestling, some smaller schools, but lacrosse really became a focus, I think, when I was in 11th grade.
Okay. And what made you choose Hopkins?
Back then there was about 20 schools. I think that if you were a big time lacrosse player, you would consider. And half of those had goalies in the freshman class that didn't need one in my class. And so you cut that population in half. And, I was left with a smaller sample, as most goalies are. But, my brother went to Navy, and I considered Navy. But Jack Emmer and West Point put a big sell on me. And I went up for a trip there, did a recruiting trip at Virginia and Hopkins. So those were my 3 trips.
Nice. You, having gone through the process yourself and just being around and talking to so many kids who have gone through that recruiting process, if there's, a young, 9th grader, 10th grader out there listening to this right now, what advice do you have for them on playing college lacrosse?
Well, don't be in a rush in the recruiting process. I think that's critical. When we see, thank God, early recruiting is kind of gone now. But when we saw this, I was on a football sideline, and there was a recruiting trip. The lacrosse coach, who I know very well, was like, "Hey, this guy's a recruit." I looked over. I'm like, that kid's like 12 years old. He's like 13. He's like a 9th grader.
Right.
One of the critical elements is when you go on a recruiting trip, you're meeting your future teammates. You're meeting your future friends for life. And when you're in 8th or 9th grade, that team that you on your visit is not going to be the team that you're playing around. So, I think it's important to hold off the decision at least until 11th grade, when you get a feeling for, I'm going to Georgetown. I really feel like I fit in well with the team, with those guys who are going to be my best friends, And so, the school, the academics, the lacrosse, but the composition of the team is so important for who you're going to become and the type of people you're going to be spending your time with. So true.
So true. Yeah. The guys on my lacrosse team, one of them was the best man at my wedding, or two others were in the, in the wedding party. Just, they're going to be your best buds for life. So.
Yeah, exactly. And, my trip to Virginia was on the first weekend of September, and Ace Adams, unfortunately, roomed me with a freshman. Now, this was a guy who was on campus for like less than a week, and he's trying to show me a school that he didn't know. He couldn't get into any of the parties. He didn't know where any of the academic buildings were. It was his first football game that he took me to as well. So that was a bungled recruiting trip on a lot of. I took my trip to Hopkins, believe it or not, in January of my senior year. Think about that by today's standards. Wow, January of my senior year. Yeah. I missed one wrestling match to be there. It was over the weekend, and January, and I made the decision a couple of weeks later in late January or February of my senior year. And by the standards back then, that was considered early. We had guys that I was playing lacrosse with that our season started as seniors in March and April, who are finally figuring things out later in April of their senior year.
Wow. That's awesome. So you get to Hopkins, and you mentioned that was kind of like the first time that you had ever received any sort of any sort of goalie coaching, any sort of formal training. I think you mentioned earlier that they changed your stance around. What else did they do? What else did you learn?
Well, I learned how to practice. I learned the details of the position. I had great coaching. Doc Matthews, who had played there, he's a orthopedic surgeon. He was a goalie coach. Larry Quinn was on and off the staff. Jerry Pfeiffer, whose son Jay played at Syracuse, and I'd later work with Jay. He was a goalie coach. Coach Zim would shoot on me. Our head coach would shoot on me once a week. He had just a wicked outside bouncer on the run. So attention to the position was never in short supply. I thought I was a good practice player when you're in high school, as so many kids do, but when you get to college, you realize you really weren't a good practice player, and the intensity of every drill, every rep matters so much more, and quickly you pick that up. I didn't start until game 6 of my freshman year, and it was a benefit. I felt I could have started and played well in week 1 against Syracuse up in the Dome, but I'm not sure I could have dealt with the failure or success that would have come my way that early in the season, to kind of sit back and look at it like, oh, you're going to get interviewed by reporters after this game. Oh, you're going to have to talk about why you won or why you lost. You're going to have to walk campus and go to class, and adulation and people, knowing that you lost the game for them. Like, just dealing with lacrosse at Johns Hopkins, I was not ready for initially. And so it was a big benefit that the coaches decided not to play me until, game 6 or so of my freshman year.
Yeah. Interesting. So on that very first start that you get, what kind of pregame nerves are you dealing with? Are you a kind of goalie that gets really amped up, really, really jittery before games, or what's your style there?
I get amped up for games now, even as a television guy. You ask Anish and Clark, they'll tell you that I'm a little. So that's never changed. The situation was that on a Monday they called me into the coach's office before practice, and that's either the worst news of that you're going to get. You're kicked out of school, you're off the team, or good news. And in this case, it was, hey, we're giving you the start this week. We're going to reevaluate it on a weekly basis. So I had a great practice week. I mean, I was fired up because your adrenaline kicks in. Saturdays, when your adrenaline kicks in, everyone's a little faster, everyone's a little quicker. But I remember the first play of that game, we won the faceoff. The faceoff guy threw the ball back to me, but it was errant. The ball went in the corner. I scooped it up, and here comes Joey Seibold, it was Gary Seibold, with a wooden shaft he had, and he hammered my arm as hard as I have ever been hammered, right on the elbow bone. I mean, it was perfect shot. Next thing you know, I got a golf ball on my elbow, and I'm like, oh, okay. So this is college lacrosse. I get it now. We're playing for keeps here. And so that fired me up so much, the fact that guy hacked my elbow. We won the game by a goal. And from then on, it was like, okay, Saturday's a different ball game. Like, I thought practice was intense, but the game was over the top intense. And I love that about it.
Love it. That's a great story. You played with Coach Petramala on that team. What was he like as a player and a teammate?
Well, I had the best seat in the house. I mean, I could see him. He could read plays a mile away, and he was explosive and aggressive, kind of like a blitzing free safety where he sees the play develop before it and blitzes the right gap and blows up the quarterback, or jumps a route. Intuitive greatness. On the ball, he was always attacking. I mean, he was always looking to take the ball away, and there are very few guys who could outrun him. He wasn't, to his own admission, he'll admit he wasn't always a great practice player. But when things mattered in practice, whether it was 1-on-1s, 6-on-6s, 4-on-3s, man up, man down, the competitive parts of practice, he's the guy you wanted to be on your team. And when we teamed up, when we were put on the same teams as scrimmages, our teams rarely. We honestly rarely lost. That was just the fact of the composition of our team, because he was that dominant, and I wanted to win all those Long Island, New York scrimmages that we used to have. Long Island, Maryland scrimmages we used to have.
I love it. And you guys still good friends today?
Yeah, we're good friends. We have a working relationship, plus years of history together. I think there's a trust that goes with that. There's an untalked about comfort level that we have with each other, because we know each other so well, and there's a behind the curtain honesty that we have that I've always enjoyed about Dave. There are moments where we'll go to the side and just talk, and we can be very real and very authentic and honest with each other about a lot of different things, whether it's our family, whether it's our careers, whether it's the sport. And so I've always valued that. And Dave is, I feel lucky to have played with him, lucky to have covered his coaching career for as long as I was able to do.
Yep. Awesome. In 1987, you go to the national championship, win the national championship. But for all the goalies out there listening who have never experienced a Division I national championship lacrosse game, how do you even start to describe that experience?
Well, yeah, the semifinal game, we had lost to Maryland in, I don't know, week 8 or 9 by 4 goals, maybe, or 2. It was a close game in the fourth quarter. We fouled. I think they beat us 4-0 in the fourth quarter. They were undefeated. Maryland was undefeated, and nobody gave us a chance. I remember, and that was when the semifinals were on ESPN 2. It was the only games broadcast all season long. And I remember preparing for that game, and our coaching staff did a remarkable job. We ended up winning the game by a lot, but no one gave us a chance. They were undefeated. All the pressure was on them. And from my standpoint, it was, you know what, this game's going to be on national TV. My high school friends haven't seen me play all season. No one's seen me play. I was like, man, I want to go up there. I just hope Maryland doesn't embarrass me, because they had shooters. They had Beardmore in the goal. They had some athletes and some shooters that were out of this world. Guys who, if they got looks, were going to score. And big, strong, athletic. And I'm just like, you know what? I just don't want to be embarrassed. I was driven that week by the fear of failure, which is very rare for me in my career to be driven that way. And then we got off to a good start. They scored early, and the place went crazy. And it was one of those, like I look back at it now, like I turned to a defender. I'm like, wow, that was really cool. Like this place is going nuts. Maryland's dancing around, telling me I suck and whatever. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. If that's the worst this is going to be, it's going to be okay. It's like you give up a goal and it's like, okay, that doesn't really hurt. I can deal with this. So then the finals, Cornell was undefeated. We were I was very confident that we were going to win that game. And I think that's the kind of the difference. You go 2 years later before the Syracuse finals, I thought we could win. Cornell game, I knew we were going to win. There's a big difference for if you're in a team sport. Yeah, I think we can win this. I know we're going to win if we do X, Y, and Z. And that Cornell playing against Paul Smoller, I have, he's in the Hall of Fame. I have tremendous respect for him. Competed against him and Sal, it seemed like forever. And that game, I felt I played a strong game that day. I was relaxed. I was loose. I made some plays, got off to a good start and finished it off. And we had a young defense. We had 3 sophomores and myself as a freshman in goal. And we had a veteran defensive midfield. And it was just, we peaked at the right time.
What gives you that level of confidence that, I know we're going to win this game? Because I would totally admit, like, there's a huge difference between, I think we got a chance. I think we're going to win. Like, I know we're going to win. And if you can get there, especially as a goalie, like, it just puts this level of confidence into your play, and you play a lot better if you can get there. But I'm curious how you got there.
I don't know. I think it was just beating Maryland. We felt like, if we could beat Maryland, there's not a team that can play with us right now. And Cornell was undefeated. We underestimated them. I looking back at it, I underestimated their talent, their toughness. They were undefeated. Teams late in the year, you don't see undefeated teams. They're undefeated for a reason. We built a lead. They came back at us. They wouldn't go away, and they nearly won that game. So Timmy Goldstein and all sorts of All-Americans on that team. But the thing for me, I found comfort, and I remember this distinctly, shaking hands with Paul Smoller at the midline, turning towards the goal. And just for a moment, I was really at ease. And it was one of those things where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm playing for a national championship. I remember when I was in 6th grade and I went to the 1983 championship with Syracuse and Hopkins, and I'm actually in that game right now. And for a second, I was like, you can get like, oh my gosh. But I was like, oh, that's cool, because I've done a lot of work to get here. I spent all those hours in the backyard against my wall. I lifted weights. I jumped rope. I did everything the coaches asked me for. Like, I'm prepared for this, and I'm going to handle this. And I'm actually less nervous than I was for a big high school wrestling match. And so I was really calm. I was overcome with a feeling of calm.
Wow. Interesting. Your next 2 seasons, 88 and 89, those are the 2 you won goalie of the year. I'm curious, was there anything like, leading up to that you did differently, or was it just sort of the accumulation of your your lacrosse career sort of coming to a peak?
we had a pretty good defense in 88. We had a strong regular season that kind of went downhill because of some injuries late in the year. And we lost an overtime playoff game at home, which was just catastrophically disappointing. 89, we beat Syracuse to open the season in a game that could have gone either way. And we got it rolling. And then we kind of let our foot off the gas pedal late in the year. And we lost to Towson to end the regular season. And that was a great wake up call for us. That got us. We were going astray off the field. We were thinking that we're a little better than we were. That loss was tremendously beneficial to get us back. That was the classic pre-playoff loss.
Yeah,
we beat UMass in round one in a low scoring game where Sal made 24 saves, and that was hard and challenging anytime you face off with a Schmoller or a Sal. And then semifinals, we were down at halftime to Carolina. No panic at all. Like that was one of those. We had a goofy team, and we're in the locker room like joking around and laughing around. We're down by 2 to Carolina in the semifinals, and we just knew we were going to make our run. We knew that the goals. I gave up some bad goals in the first half of that game, and I'm like, we got this. We're fine. Stick to what we're doing. It's going to go. We're just a little slow, and we dominated the second half of that game. And then the 89 championship was it was just played at such a great tempo. That was a lot of fun to play in that game. Unfortunately, we came up short. But from my career development, there was nothing. I continued to take a lot of shots before and after practice. I think I was lifting a lot of weights. I was jumping a lot of rope. I became much better practice player. I took off my chest protector in practice in 1988 because I felt like I was drifting through practice. And kids, you can't do this now. It was a different game, but in order to focus, I was like, one day I'm like, I'm giving up some goals in practice. I shouldn't give up because I'm not focused. Well, how can I focus better? Oh, I'll practice today without a chest protector. That'll force me to focus. And so that became that was how I handled the next 3 years.
I love it. Strip off all that gear, I'm too protected.
Well, because I was you're drifting. It's like once you've played for a national title or played in big games, it's like, okay, why do I care about this drill? Why do I care about this drill? You have to care about this drill. And the only way to get better is to focus on every drill and try to make it, And so, we had a stage there where I'd have practices that were pretty darn good, that I'm only giving up 2, 3, 4, 5 goals the entire practice. And that's how you go from good to great.
Yeah. It's that we've talked about it on this podcast a couple of times. It's that for me, it's that strong connection to the why. Like, why are you really out here doing this? And when I train kids, like that's the first thing we talk about, right? I mean, you could put them through shooting drills and put them through some training, but if you really understand, like, oh, this guy's, backup, he's a junior and he's a backup on his high school team, and his why is he wants to earn that starting role. Well, then all of a sudden, like, the level of intensity of each drill just goes up by like 5x, 10x. So I think it's that connection to the why, I think, is kind of what you're talking about.
Constant improvement, whether it's save making, as we talked about earlier, ground ball play, clearing, understanding defense, understanding man down defense, understanding clears. And then becoming a good teammate. I think when you're a freshman and you're just worried about stopping the ball, there's very little put on your plate in terms of defensive leadership and overall team leadership. And later on, you become responsible for how the defense is playing that day in practice. The guys you want to get after to have them have a better practice, the guys who need a hug, the young guys who you have to teach, who you have to spend some time telling them how to make that slide correctly or when to go and not to go. And so it becomes more about everybody else and less about you as your career develops.
Yeah. Love it. When you graduated in 1989, there was really no professional.
No, I had another season. I had a 90 season. That was a year to forget. Yeah. I was actually, I always felt, and I have teammates who felt that I was a much better goalie that year, but we struggled. We went, we made the playoffs. We hosted Princeton, team we had beaten by like 12 goals week 1, and we lost to them in overtime. So it was a very disappointing ending. Our coach ended up getting fired. It was a tough way to go out. It was a real disappointing season.
Yeah, I bet. The question I was going to ask was, professional outdoor lacrosse didn't exist back then. Yeah. I mean, the MLL was 2000, 2001 it started. There was the indoor league. But if professional lacrosse did exist back then, do you think you would have went to play professional outdoor lacrosse as a goalie?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I played for Mount Washington Lacrosse Club, 1991 for 2 years. I played with them. That we won the championship in 1991, playing alongside some great, Petramala and others, a lot of Towson guys. And I think the cool thing there was I realized that, there was very talented lacrosse players who were not as fortunate as I was to play at a program that got a lot of attention. That there were equally as talented players who were playing down the street at UMBC, Loyola, Towson. Had a couple guys from Penn State on our team, Lehigh, and that was wonderful. And then I kicked around, played a few years for the Green Turtle, and then finished off with Team Toyota in the late '90s. And that was a fun experience. It was low key. It was enjoyable. It was fun.
Yeah.
But I was drafted by the Pittsburgh Bulls for the indoor league to play goalie, and didn't accept that. And then later played for the Baltimore Thunder, not goalie though. But that's a story for a different day.
That's right. I was going to say, so towards the end of your senior year, is that when you start thinking like, all right, what am I going to do? Post college, like career wise, and is that when you start thinking about journalism, broadcasting, or how did that?
No, I interned for Citicorp. They had a credit card business, the Choice Visa card, up in Towson here, and I had a connection and interned prior to my senior year, working in their HR department, interviewing folks for collections and customer service positions for their telemarketing.
Yeah,
and took a job there after college and ended up working there maybe a year, but it was a beneficial experience to see what a 9 to 5 for a major corporation was going to be like. And as soon as February turned to March of that first year and it hit 3:00, I'm like, I got to get out of here. What am I doing in this office all day? And I was, again, beneficial. It was a rude awakening to me of what corporate life. Having grown up with in a family, my parents were both teachers, and so sports in the afternoon was a big part of our lives. Having that denied for me, I really felt like I couldn't breathe every day at 3:00, and I had to get out of there.
Interesting. So, how did the journalism broadcasting thing, like, where'd you start out with that then?
I was asked by the Hopkins radio guys to come join them in 1991. Howard Mash and Bill Tanton, just out of nowhere, I got a phone call from Howard saying, "Hey, you want to join us next spring on the radio? It'll be a trio." And so that was an awesome opportunity. Howard was a character, man. He was a smooth talker. His dad owned Mash's Hams. He was a gazillionaire, but he loved to dabble in sports, whether it be TV or radio. Bill Tanton was a longtime columnist for the Baltimore Sun, a legend in this town, covered the Colts, covered, the Orioles back when they were winning World Series. And so Bill was a legend. And so to be around those two, our road trips were just hilarious. We couldn't have had a better time. We had instant chemistry, and it was a lot of fun. And that radio, I think I did radio for 2 years. And then our third year, we got picked up by Home Team Sports, which was an up and coming cable channel in Washington, D.C. And we did 5 or 6 Hopkins lacrosse games on TV. And wow. That's how it started.
Yeah. Interesting.
It was all very part-time.
Yeah. And then at what point did, from there, ESPN kind of noticed you doing the games and offered you a position, or how'd you get started with ESPN?
I started in ESPN in 94, maybe, covering MILL, indoor games on ESPN2. They had Lee Felsmo and Christy Lee. They had a game of the week, and they had a situation where they needed a play-by-play announcer to go call one game. And I had a tryout in Philadelphia, me and this other gentleman up top, and Bill Fitz was a producer. He had produced like the first Super Bowl, and he was overlooking. We both called a Philadelphia Wings game to tape that they were going to, basically hire whoever they liked best. Well, I end up winning that audition. They send me up to Boston. I cover the Wings and the Boston Blazers. It's a game that Dallas Elliott like posts all the time on his Instagram page. And it was like one of the last games in the Boston Garden. I think it was like January of 95. I called the game in the old Boston Garden, and I listened to it. I'm like, oh my God, that was horrible. And I got a call after the game. They're like, yeah, we'd like you to join us for the rest of the season. So I ended up working on those ESPN2 games, the playoff run in 95 and then 96. And then at the same time, the production company that handled that was handling the NCAA championships. So they're like, yeah, we're going to have you and Leaf do the championships in 95. And I was more comfortable, obviously, covering field lacrosse. But it was very right place, right time, get a tryout, make it work, and then keep pushing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome story. And you've been covering, lacrosse for a long time. And the growth of the sport has really taken off. I mean, from when, you were covering national championships in 2000 to 20 years later, would you say that's changed the way that you do your commentary, the growth of the sport?
Yeah, it's gotten harder to keep track because there are so many more good programs now. 70 D1, D2, hundreds of D3 women's. So there's more lacrosse. That's harder. But what's easier is there's more video. When I first started, there was like no video. Like teams existed in their own little bubble, and you'd have to trust your friends. Hey, did you watch the Penn State game against Villanova last week? Tell me about this kid, Damon. Oh, this attacker, you should see him. He's great. Well, like nobody knew. Like everyone knew their own little areas. But I was lucky enough. Leif Elsmo had Toyota Lacrosse Weekly going in the mid 90s. And I'd go down to his house in Annapolis 2 days a week, or at least one day for a long day, and edit highlight packages of footage that he was being sent from around the country. So I'd get to see UMass play Harvard. I'd get to see Hofstra play St. John's. I'd get to see Delaware play Penn, games that nobody else had access to. And those highlight packages obviously ran on the show. That show was so good. It was just ahead of the curve. It was ahead of the growth curve. But for me, it was really beneficial because I could see the great players. I could see what made good players. I could see trends in the game. Who's emerging stars, what teams are actually better than they were getting credit for. So I was very fortunate, and I enjoyed putting together those highlight packages.
Yeah. Well, when you watch, the lacrosse commentary of those earlier games, it's like, the first shot that gets taken that people chase out. It's like, remember, folks, in lacrosse, like the closest to the end line when the shot goes out retains possession. Like you're kind of like explaining the game a little bit in the commentary because it's a newer sport on television. And I don't see that anymore. And that's great, right? I mean, like people are getting a lot more familiar with lacrosse, and I love that.
Yeah, we still have to do teaching. The bigger the game. Yeah, we talk about it all the time. Don't assume that the viewer, and if we're going to grow our audience, we have to cater to the new viewer. So you may hear Anish say early on in a game, Virginia retains possession. They were closer to it when it went out. Subtly. That's the most challenging thing. I talk about it all the time is, I can broadcast to the lacrosse expert. I can broadcast to the high school player. I can broadcast to the newbie. Well, I got to hopefully do a broadcast that appeals to all three. And so sprinkle in advanced, sprinkle in medium, sprinkle in beginner. And that's what I find to be the most challenging. Who do I gear this broadcast to?
Well, I thoroughly enjoy listening to you, Quint. Thank you so much for, representing the lacrosse goalie community. I know anytime you put yourself out there, whether it be on Instagram or even, doing what you do, like people are going to say some things, there's going to be some chirping, but I love what you do. I think you provide awesome goalie analysis during the broadcast, and I love it. So thank you so much.
Well, as a goalie, you learn to deal with the chirping. That's nothing new for the position. I will tell you one thing. Goalies are a little different. I've had my goalie camp for 25 years. It's small, 50 to 75 kids. And every year I'm like, do I want to do this again? And I show up and these kids are driven. Like you don't put a kid in the goal. Like mom and dad don't put a kid in the goal. Like it just doesn't work. He wants to be there. And so what I have found so refreshing is that when I have these camps and I see young goalies or I go to a college practice, like these guys, they love it. And because they have so much invested, like they're putting themselves out there. And that's the cool thing about the position, I think. And thank you for catering to that.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you even remember some of these specific comments. I'll throw a couple out and see if you remember them. So 2004 championship game, Navy Syracuse, Matt Russell gets tagged in the thigh and the ball goes in. And you're like, guys, as a goalie, like, that is so demoralizing, like, to get good meat on it and still have it go in. So true. It's so true. I mean, that is the worst. That is the worst when you get hit by the shot.
It's the worst.
And it goes in.
It's the worst. It's the worst in practice when it happens. Like, that's the worst. Like, on a game, you're like, but like, to get it good, to get hit by it and it still goes in, it's like, man, this is not going to be my day. You know, I always like gauge my practice week. How many bad goals did I give up this week? And then fluky goals I'd love to give up in practice. The shot's going wide by like 5 yards and hits off a defender's helmet and goes in. Mm-hmm. In practice, and you're like, thank God we got that one out of the way. There's no way that can happen twice. There's no way that's going to happen on game day because it already happened. Like, you know, the crazy fluky goals, get those out of the way during the week, but don't give up bad goals during the week, because all I know is when I gave up bad goals during the week, goals I should have had, goals that I was lazy on or missed, I gave them up on Saturdays as well.
I love it. I love it. You know, with last year, I wanted to ask you, last year, you know, the seasons got canceled with the COVID, and obviously devastating for any goalie, any senior. You know, that was your last opportunity. I'm curious for you, it's probably the first time without lacrosse in a long time. I'm curious how you handled it.
I struggled. You know, I have a daughter. She's 11. She's in 6th grade now. Last year she was in 5th grade, but they sent everybody home, and school for the spring was online. And quite honestly, she goes to a very, very good school, but they weren't ready for it. And so it was very partial. Their online offerings this fall, now she's back in school, but their online offerings this fall were drastically improved. I mean, it was like real school at home. But so there was a lot going on from a parental standpoint to distract me from the fact that we didn't have lacrosse. But I felt physically, I felt tired, drained, and sore. You know, I kept my workouts going, but games, even now as an announcer, like, there's adrenaline, there's the national anthem, the big hit, the big goal, the crowd. Like, I draw positive blood chemistry from those games, to be at those games, to get excited for those games, to see those moments. Like, it fulfills me. And without that, I felt really kind of drained. I wasn't getting any external juice.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, so awesome. It's going to be back this year. We don't know in what context, but who are you, from a lacrosse goalie standpoint, who are you most excited to watch this year?
I'm interested right down the road. Hopkins has got, Josh Curson transfer from Ohio State. It'll be interesting to see what he can do there. The Blake Porter, or Drake, excuse me, Drake Porter at Syracuse. Yeah, he's super steady. He is so calm. He's really steady. He had great numbers last year. He makes it kind of look easy. He's not that flamboyant. He handles the ball well, but he doesn't wow you with anything. And at the end of the day, you look at him and he's like, well, he got 70% today, or he got 65%, or, nice numbers. He's steady as a rock. Who's going to be the next great goalie? It'll be interesting. The opportunity now, the PLL, the great news is we have one league. The bad news is that it's going to be really tough for a graduating goalie to make one of these rosters. There's only going to be like 20 rookies who make the league. Like, if you do the math at a 13.8% turnover rate, like the NFL has, that's room for 20 rookies. Okay. If you have 20 rookies, how many are goalies? 2?
Yeah.
One or two. Yeah. So there's only 1 or 2 guys who are going to be pros. So, I think Virginia's goalie has come a long way. Yeah. Alex, he is, I met him years ago when they had the ride out in Nike had the ride out in Oregon. And I wasn't sure about what he was going to look like as a college goalie. I got the sense that he didn't, at the time, that I couldn't get him to do any extra work, to take extra shots. And that's so I'm based on the kid saying, hey, coach, can we stay after practice and take 10 minutes of shots from a certain angle? And I didn't get that sense for him. Fast forward a couple of years, I had him coach at my camp. He's awesome with kids. He's so into it. Like, something snapped with him where he's like made that transformation from a high school kid who maybe was a little unsure of himself to now a young man who's heading in the right direction. And I've seen that confidence grow in the field. And so he's a guy who I will always root for because I've seen him work with the kids at camp, and he's a special kid.
Love it. I'll throw my 2 cents into the mix here. Not that I'm a famous commentator, but Mike Adler, St. Joe's goalie, transferred to Duke.
Yeah, Duke.
I had him on the podcast. By the way, he told this amazing story about getting attacked by a shark. You gotta hear that story. Anyway, but it's going to be so interesting to see people, especially from a goalie standpoint. Like as a goalie, you're a leader of the team. Like that's what makes goalies great, when they are those leaders. And now, like transferring in this odd COVID mixed season, it's like, how do you create that chemistry and like become a leader of those men over Zoom? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and he's on a great team.
Yeah.
His expectation level, though, has changed when you go from a St. Joe's to a Duke's. The expectation level, the pressure, how does he handle that? I'm sure he's very excited, and he should be. And he's an exceptional goalie, so I think he's going to do really well. It'll be very exciting for him. But to play a Duke schedule it'll be a challenge. He's going to see the ACC's best. Notre Dame's goalie, Liam Entenmann.
Okay.
He's got potential. He was a freshman last year. There were glimpses, and he showed some youthful mistakes that he made. But from a physical standpoint, he's got the body of a pro. He's kind of long, but he's explosive and really flexible. He goes from pipe to pipe well. He's super smooth. He's a guy going forward. I guess he'd be considered a sophomore now, maybe with freshman eligibility, but he's a guy who could be a future pro, I think, just from an athletic standpoint.
Awesome. I want to close out our conversation by chatting about your coaching of goalies. You mentioned you're still doing the camp. That's awesome. What's your approach to coaching lacrosse goalies nowadays? Like, what does the Quint Kessenich goalie camp look like?
Keep it simple. Going back, I started coaching at Boys Latin as I mentioned that job earlier with Citibank. At 5:00, I would drive home, and I was driving on Lake Avenue towards Mount Washington, where I had an apartment. And I passed the school on the right. I had no idea what school it was. I saw lacrosse practice. I pull into the parking lot. I'm watching lacrosse practice. It's 5:00 and raining. All of a sudden, up the hill walks their coach. I have no idea who this guy is. He comes over to my car. He goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm just watching practice." He goes, "Why don't you come out tomorrow and help the goalies?" I'm like, "I'd love to. I'm Quint." He goes, "I know who you are." Well, it was Boys Latin School, and it was Bob Shriver. And so like 40 years later, we're still like best friends. I came out the next day in my suit in the mud and started warming up goalies in 1991. I ended up coaching there for 12 years, on and off for 12 years. I haven't done it in a while since my daughter was born, but it was the greatest experience. I mean, the greatest. And what I learned, man, your goalie's as good as you think he is. Your goalie's as good as you tell him he is. When I see goalies with a lack of confidence, that usually comes from a coach who has a lack of confidence in their goalie. I always felt emboldened when coach would send me out to warm up, because I could tell that he had my back. And if you got to have the back of your goalie. And so that was always big with me. Do the work. You got to do the work. And we worked hard. We had 3 goalies. I would warm up my backup goalie during halftime of games. We had a kid one year who was pretty good. He ended up going to Miami, architecture, done well, played club there, but he was good. His name was Troy Morocco, called him the Italian Stallion. Everyone had a nickname. Well, Stallion never got in much. And Stallion's dad was the greatest fan. And he'd come to all the games. And I always felt bad. It was like halfway through the year, I'm like, man, that guy's at all our games. He's the most positive parent, and he doesn't get to watch his son play. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to warm him up next week at halftime. And so I got in this mode where I'm warming up my backup goalie at halftime to give him a feel what it's like to be shot on in front of a crowd. But for Troy, it was so his dad could watch him play. And this kid puffed up like you wouldn't believe. And because he was nervous. It was the first time he'd been shot on with his dad in attendance since he was like in rec league. And so I've always used halftime to bring my backup out there and give him like a feel for what it's going to be like. I've always felt that during practice, there are dead times for goalies, whether you're doing riding or clearing or half field, or fill those dead time with extra shots. So if the ball was at the other end of the field, I'm shooting on this goalie for 3, 4, 5 minutes. Ball changes and comes up, I'm running down the other end, shoot on that goalie. So we're trying to cram in extra reps. Practice is only going to be 2.5 hours. Maximize your time in the goal before, after, and during practice. You can't get enough reps.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier in our conversation about kids today have it, a lot easier with the tape, the film and the video that they can watch. They have it a lot easier too with these goalies on Instagram. I mean, you've got, the elite goalies in the game, Kyle Bernlohr, guys that I study and I'm fans of, like posting these drills that are just like amazing, like next level stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what it takes to get to the highest level of our sport. And you know what? Write those down. And like you said, Quint, when you've got dead time, like fill it with shots or fill it with drills, because you need to get that work in.
Yeah, no, I was always working on something before and after practice, whether it was ground ball play, outlet passes, dodging, or saves. And when you break down your saves, I think it's really important to be specific. I see too many goalies getting shot on from 15 yards and out. Okay. People don't shoot from 15 yards and out. You don't need to practice those shots. You need to practice your inside one-on-ones, one fake and a shot, two fakes and a shot, three fakes and a shot from point blank range. Because if you practice those in a game, you will make that save. But that is an acquired skill, those point blank shots, mid-rangers, shots on the run. So many young goalies struggle with the ball coming out of middies, dodging. Well, it's tiring as a coach. That's part of the deal. If you're going to shoot on goalies, you got to run down the alley. You got to do it 30 times and fire on these kids, because those are game-like shots. I'm a big believer in game-like shots. And so whenever I stayed after practice, I'd grab an attackman and I'd tell him, Scott Marr, Mike Morrow, I'm like, okay, do your inside roll and take your game shot. Boom. And we do it. And it was really beneficial for them, because then we discuss things. I'm like, I'm holding the pipe until you give me that motion. And then I'm going to probably, take away the offsider. We talk about things. He goes, well, what if I fake you here? I'm like, that's a great time to fake, because I think you're going to, and so that discourse back and forth between shooter and goaltender can become very educational.
I used to do that all the time. Yeah, I would talk about specific situations with the attack guys, and like, hey, when you're coming around from X, like, what are you seeing from me? Like, oh, I'm seeing you kind of like come off the pipe a little bit too soon, and I just, shoot it short side, and then like, great, that's what I need to work on. So they can give you an awesome perspective. That's a great tip.
So there's knowledge, yeah, and I agree with that. I cover college wrestling, and the amount of technique stuff that's out in the internet now on social media is incredible. The setups for takedowns, single legs, the finishing, like none of that existed when I wrestled. I would have been actually pretty good with some of the coaching that goes on. The same can be applied to lacrosse, especially from the goalie position. I'm not a huge fan of what I call goofy goalie drills. Things that like, why are we doing that? I'm more of a functionally oriented, like a baseball batter. To get good as a hitter, you got to take a lot of batting practice. A free throw shooter, to get good, you got to take a lot of foul shots. And you can work on obviously cleaning up your technique, but in order to be good at making saves, you've got to make saves. And again, focus on in tight 5-yard shots, 8-yard shots, 10-yard shots. Stop worrying so much about the stuff from the perimeter.
Love it. Well, let me know when you're doing the camp. I'll help promote it. Is it over the summers, or when do you
over the summer?
It's
for a week. It's at night only, and so it's local kids here. We've had excellent staff through the years. We've trained. Jake Stover was a camper. I remember the first time Jacob Stover showed up at camp with his dad Matt, and I was kind of like, Matt's was kicker for the Ravens. Jake showed up. Jake showed up with these black football pants with thigh pads and knee pads. I think he was in like 6th grade. There we are, 10 years later when he's at Loyola, and I started training him on the side and become friends with the family. And that was a real positive story. But again, the greatest thing about camp is the kids, they're not there because mom and dad want them to be there. They're there because they want to get better. And that I find that every year, to be the most inspiring thing.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I had Jake on the podcast. He's awesome. Awesome guy. So much energy. Yeah.
Very positive. Very positive. I mean, you could score on Jake and he'd smile and laugh at you. Like, wait, I just scored on you. We used to compete at the end of our sessions, and when he was in high school, and it was very enjoyable to work with him.
Yeah. Awesome. Sounds like you've got a great gig at ESPN. Do you see yourself kind of growing that commentator career? Do you ever see yourself getting more into coaching one day?
I think, well, I'm going to grow the commentator career and continue with it as long as I can.
Yeah.
And when that changes to either part-time or no more, I do see myself coaching somewhere, probably not at the college level, maybe a low-level college or high school, somewhere where it's sunny and warm.
Yeah. Come down to Argentina. Start up the program there. Quint, thank you so much for taking the time, telling your stories. It's such a pleasure to be able to chat with you. I mean, I just looked up. We're already way past the hour mark. Time flies when you're talking lacrosse goalie. If there's one last piece of goalie advice that you could leave for the kids, what would that be?
Well, first of all, fans can get in touch with me. Instagram, it's Quint Kessenich. Twitter, I'm on there. You can find me as well. So don't be bashful. Send me some questions. If you want to, even if we develop a relationship, you can send me tape and I can look at it. So I'm always willing and able to help. The game of lacrosse can give you a lot. I just, I enjoyed putting in the time and doing the work, and then it paid so many benefits in terms of friendships, a good college education, post-collegiate. I chose to make lacrosse a career. It was rough when I was in my 20s in terms of financially, but it's panned out for the best. I had a dream, I had a vision of what I thought this could be if the sport continued to grow, and we're just getting started. So if you're a young goalie right now, you're lucky. You're growing up in an era where you're going to be really taken care of. You're going to have expertise. For you just got to put in the work. You got to be hungry and do the work and do the reps.
Quint, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I'll let you know when this comes out, probably in a couple weeks. And once again, thanks so much. Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, I'm around.
All right.
I can't wait to see Beardy. He's the best.
Yeah. All right. Take care, Quint.